Excellent. Thank you. Welcome. I'm happy you're here. Today is Tuesday, December 10th. I am so thankful for this meeting of our bicycle industry retailer-focused e-bike safety and standards panel. We're doing great work here. This is a quarterly platform that provides a chance for industry experts and retailers to meet, and we discuss and address retailer risks, concerns, and best practices regarding lithium-ion batteries and e-mobility devices when we talk about safety, standards, and compliance. The NBDA, we greatly appreciate the panel members, all who have volunteered their time and expertise to this discussion. Tremendous energy has gone into making this a valuable resource, not just for retailers, but the industry and even outside the industry. We truly believe that working united, this collective conversation will propel us all towards continuous growth in e-bike sales and participation with limited risk and increased safety for all. Panel members, thank you for being here. It's great to see you all.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
We
have lots of attendees today, and we're appreciative of you taking the time out of your day to join us. We welcome your participation as we go. You can place questions into the chat or use the Q&A function. Those questions we will, as a panel, address back either in the chat or we will answer them live. So we highly, highly suggest that you do place questions. We want this to be as interactive as possible. Co-moderating our forum today is industry expert, my personal friend, Mr. Jay Townley from Human Powered Solutions, and he will kick us off with a reminder of why we're here and some words for the panel members and those in attendance. Jay?
Thank you, Heather, and welcome everybody. Nice to see all of your shining faces today. First of all, our opening statement, as you've all heard at previous sessions, the purpose of the bicycle industry e-bike safety and standards panel is to create a safe and positive environment for our industry to become proactive relative to the situation and the opportunity that's been created by the growth of micromobility, as Heather said, and the use of lithium-ion batteries for powering propulsion systems, and to review and update proposed action items every quarter. The format, which is open to suggestions, by the way, and to change, is constructed so everyone who wishes to will be given the opportunity to share thoughts, ideas, suggestions, everything within the allocated time specified by the moderator for each question. Now, this is without interruption, and everyone else is asked to listen in a respectful and non-judgmental way with no negative reactions, please. Also, please direct all comments directly to the questions or the issue, not the comments made by the other participants. All discussions will be summarized, and proactive and constructive action items will be proposed for action by some or all of the attendees. The panel sessions will also be recorded, and so participants and listeners can review the questions, the discussions, the suggestions, and the summary, and the resulting proposed proactive and constructive action items. And I do encourage you to look at or look up and also use that recording, because it can be quite helpful relative to particularly the actions that you draw to move for the future. So thank you, Heather.
Thank you so much, Jay. We've been doing this for over a year now, and it's just simply a pleasure. The topics that we review at each meeting are topics that have been submitted to us from our retailer members, industry partners, or panel members. Every time that we prepare for one of these events, we do reach out to our members well in advance and ask for topics. And we have been recently overwhelmed with the number of topics. We do our best to select the top 3 topics in today's instance that we think are most compelling to discuss given the time we are in December 2024. And if we don't select your topic that we submitted, we have it just kind of like in the back burner for future events, or we've done our best to already connect you with an expert. So I appreciate all the topics that come in, and I do love to see the industry really getting together to make these events a worthwhile discussion for all. So as I mentioned on today's agenda, we have 3 topics, and how the forum will progress is I will read the topic and the question that we are reviewing. Then our panel members who have already reached out and suggested that they like to speak on the topic will each have their turn, and then we'll open it up to some general conversation where we'll get the other panel members involved or our attendees. It's a great time for you to get involved in the conversation. So here we go. Without further ado, let's jump into topic 1. This is a really important topic, and it's the impact of California's new e-bike regulations and simply what retailers and riders need to know. So the question is exactly what are the key impacts of California's new e-bike regulations on class 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes, and how do they compare to the previous standards? There's a lot to know here, so I'm really glad to see this topic introduced. Speaker 1, Mr. Peter Woolery from Bicycle Market Research. Peter?
Yeah, Heather, thank you for having me on here. I always enjoy these panels. I wanted to do a simple presentation here just to show some of the backdrop of what we're talking about. So hopefully you can see the chart here of search trend data. So this is looking at Google search trends, and it's taking some words and combining them. But the important part to note from here is that speed electric and speed e-bike and fast e-bikes are definitely the more dominant category of search terms. So consumers are looking for these higher speed electric bikes. Now that gives some credence to the discussion of people going too fast for bike lanes or what have you, both in the United States and Europe. And it's actually outpacing, as you can see here, throttle and what I've taken to calling bench style, which would be like moped style or motorcycle style. So the point is, people are looking for higher speeds, not necessarily illegal, but that's where the changes in New York and California, California is what we'll be talking about today, is important. It's good that they're making some changes here because there's so much demand for it. So when we look at these changes, with the old standard, looking at motor power, we had 750 watts or 1 horsepower as the main definition, but it didn't really say what that meant. And so a lot of brands have taken it, making it nominal power, whereas others have abided by it as peak. In the California rules now, in SB 1271, it's stating that the motor cannot exceed or does not have the capability to exceed 750 watts. And so that's really showing that peak aspect of it. The second is with class 3. Up to now, you've been able to have throttles on class 3 e-bikes and to propel you up to 20 miles an hour on the throttle alone as somewhat of a loophole between the class 2 and 3 system. The new rules are going to change it so that you can't have it up to 20 miles an hour. Instead, you can have a boost to start you off or a walk mode up to 3.5, or it may actually be 3.7 miles per hour. So what they don't define is how that is engaged. It doesn't specifically say that you can't have a throttle. So there may be a workaround there for brands to be able to have a throttle, but it can only work up to 3.5 miles an hour until you start pedaling. Again, it makes some sense. There's still some fuzziness, but it's just tightening up those loopholes. One of the important ones that I know the NBDA has been really working on is getting more compliance available. The previous standard didn't really have tight regulations around it. The new California standard is allowing for UL and EN standards of compliance. EN is important just for brands who already have that standard to be able to put it on there and have some compliance without the excessive burden. Ideally, we get to standards that are specific to the speeds and conditions of the United States, but there's going to be some transition period. And then finally, I wanted to bring up the modifications. In my direct consumer research, I see a good handful of brands that will advertise an off-road mode or 28 plus miles per hour. Or if this is only for private use, contact us and we'll tell you how to disable the speed limiter. These are all things that are not allowed in the new standard in California, as it should be. Previously, it was, it's the consumer's responsibility to make those decisions. and now it's the brand cannot make it so that it can be done. There's, of course, going to be other brands who sell modification chips and the like to do those types of things, and that's not necessarily the brand's responsibility. What I wanted to bring up is just to set the stage for this conversation of some of the technical details after reading the actual words of the legislation, and then hand it off to the other panelists in this discussion to give more context of what that means overall for our industry or community from here.
Excellent. Peter, thank you so much. It's kind of startling to see that consumer search for speed. Like, you know, you make the assumption, right, that that's probably happening, but to see that graph as you outlined it, appreciate you always bringing the data forward for us to see. Let's move over then. We'll look at Clint Sandusky, e-bike expert, law enforcement bike patrol instructor, who I know has a presentation to share with us as well. Thank you, Clint.
Heather, and thank you, Peter. I mean, that was a great segue into my presentation. Like Heather said, I had a 30-year career in law enforcement in California as a police officer, bike cop, and bike instructor. So I'm kind of a vehicle code junkie. I'd like to start out with 3 statements, and I think we can all agree with these. Technology is outpacing the laws. And I like what California did to address some of those issues. As California goes, so goes the nation. That could be good or bad. With the laws, I believe, like SB 1271, that's good. Some of these age restriction laws where cities or counties can enact them, not so good. But I do encourage everybody to do their own research to better educate themselves and their customers with some assistance from fellow retailers, industry experts, local, county, and state officials, legal counsel if you have to. In the upcoming slides, I'm going to talk about how you can do your own research to be better educated. So, of course, this topic 1 kind of mirrors an article that was in the Bicycle Retailer back in October. I want to caution you, though, toward the end of their article, where they're talking about these age restriction bills, they got the information wrong, incorrect. And if anybody wants to ask what they got wrong, I'd be more than happy to share that with you. Here are my key California e-bike bicycle bills, and I'll let you look at them for a second. You see there AB 1778 and 2234. Those are the e-bike pilot programs from Marin County and San Diego County. There's also the e-bike study from the Medina Transportation Institute there at San Jose State, where they're going to be looking at a lot of things: crash data, crash reports, hospitalizations, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, the one we want to focus on is on the SB 1271. I found this email back in August. People for Bikes stated that they were diligently working on behalf of the bicycle industry to shape SB 1271. So I wanted to show you actually how to do your own research. To go into the California Legislative Information website to look up these bills and these laws. So all you have to do is simply do a Find California Code in the search bar, and this website will come up. You want to highlight or select bill information. You type in the bill number, no hyphens. Be sure to put in the correct session year, in this case 2324. You can also type in keywords. Next to it, you see California law, and within there are all 29 California legal codes, from the vehicle code, penal code, education code, health and safety code, all there for you. This is really a good information right here for you. The bill analysis. It gets into the analysis of the bill, the comments from the author, fiscal effect, as well as support and opposition. It may list some of the organizations that either support or oppose it, as well as why they don't. So that's a wealth of information right there. My quick thoughts on some of these bills, a good start, like Peter mentioned, the updating of the definition of the e-bikes in the three classes, as well as in this SB 1271, clearly defining what is not an e-bike. What I think fell short, I would have liked to have seen the legislature actually specifically design what these out-of-class vehicles are so we can get them off our roads, our trails, and our paths. So hopefully next time. Also, with these age restriction bills, boy, I wish they would have focused on compliance first, or education first. As far as to be determined, we'll see how many cities with these age restrictions actually do create ordinances and how they will be enforced, how much from not only law enforcement, but fire with the California fire codes. Also, with these age restrictions, it's going to be an administrative nightmare. Not to mention, do we want our kids that are, say, 14 but look under 12 or 16 to law enforcement officers being pulled over? I think it well intended, but just in my opinion, the wrong approach. There's a lot of other resources out there, from whether it's California or nationally, for retailers and everybody else to look at. Wealth of information, and of course, IA, AI. You want to that's a good thing as well. So I found this very interesting. I found this on UL Solutions website, a comparison of e-bike standards from the EN European standard to the UL US Canada standard. So bottom line, even if these new e-bike laws are not enforced as much as you would like, or the ordinances aren't enacted, it's up to everybody to educate themselves and follow the laws. For retailers, and everybody else, the credibility, customer confidence, care and safety, which is important, which all leads to customer loyalty, getting your customers back in to buy more bikes and more product. And of course, it increases your protection against possible legal actions if these existing or new laws aren't followed. And for more on that, I did an article back in 2021 on how retailers, I believe, are the first line of defense in e-bike safety. But you're not the only ones. So here's a more comprehensive list of all the various stakeholders out there that need to be involved as well. So thank you, Heather. Feel free to email me should you have any follow-up questions. And I'll pass it off to Richard.
Excellent. Clint, I really appreciate your overview here. As you present, there is a lot of information out there. And I love how you have given our attendees and our panel members direct access to how to get that information and digest it themselves. And I've worked extensively with you, Clint. I know the type of person you are, very giving and able and capable. So if any of our attendees or panelists want some more information, they want to connect with Clint, please send me a note and I'll be more than happy to connect you directly to him. There's a lot of great information there, but sometimes just finding out how to get to it would be helpful. So Clint, thank you so much for that great overview. We are really getting a nice look at what is going on in California. Let's take our speaker number 3, Richard Wittenberg from Truxas Mobility. Richard, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. So I think what was hoping to accomplish today was really have a dialogue with our retailers about looking at this from a manufacturer's point of view and sort of what are we looking at and what are we trying to do to, one, meet market demands. And I think, Peter, you did an excellent job, outlining here's what people want, right? And then here's what we can give them and be within the constraints of the laws. That's one piece. And then the other piece of this is the rest of the country going to necessarily follow California, right? So as a manufacturer, we're looking at, are we going to create 2 different models? Are we going to have a California compliant model and a rest of the country compliant model? Or how are we going to balance those 2 opportunities? Always keeping in mind that we've got a whole bunch of gray, I'm going to call it gray market, but less expensive, direct-to-consumer, Amazon-based models. I shouldn't have said Amazon, but I should have said marketplace models that come into the marketplace that for some reason are skating around it and are not having to apply that same rigor of legality that we do as people who are working through, what we consider robust carrying channels for distribution. So, for me as the man in charge of Troxis, I'm looking at this and saying I have to create products that will work countrywide, right? So I can't have a California specific model and I can't have for the rest of the country. All of our bikes have to be UL or EN certified. That's just the way it's got to be, just to keep everybody sane. But now we come to this little piece of what's going to happen to the throttle in the bike, right? So class 1 was never an issue. Class 2, still not an issue. Class 3 is really the issue of how are we as a manufacturer going to handle this? And, there are a couple of thoughts. One is that there is a throttle that is sold aftermarket that retailers in California would not necessarily install or be installed to keep it legal. And again, I have not had my legal team validate whether these are legal or not. I'm just trying to bring everybody through the thought process of what we're contemplating. And I want to hear from the retailers about, yeah, that works for me, or no, that doesn't work for me. Don't do that. So this is really a discussion. So throw it up in the chat and hopefully I can multitask. So, we're really looking at, are we going to ship bikes without throttles installed on class 3 bikes? Because that is where the majority of the demand in this surge of acceptance of e-bikes is coming from. It's 28 mile an hour pedal assist bikes. So I'd like to hear from both California and non-California based retailers is, what do you think if we shipped our class 3 bikes without throttles installed, understanding that people in Ohio could then install the throttle where it would be legal? And what do the California-based retailers feel about us not including it, and maybe the customer being able to buy it from us directly and install it themselves, but still that would violate our responsibility under the law. But I'd just like to hear from the rest of the country, what are their feelings about the rule and it coming to them and how they'd want to see it handled.
Yeah, Richard, I'm so thankful for you to bring up this side of the conversation. It is really important how the suppliers are going to navigate this and how the retailers are going to navigate when a consumer comes in, maybe unaware of the law and wants this faster equipped bike. I do see some retailers that are on the panel that I could call on to talk, but I'm hopeful we'll have some retailers jump in. I think, Will, you see me eyeballing you right now. William, you want to jump in?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, the problem we're seeing, whether it's state or whether it's province up here in Canada, is we really need to be looking at this at a national level rather than just a state or a city or, whatever. It needs to be at a national program, because exactly these types of issues are not going to be solved. I mean, the throttle issue that Richard's going through is, okay, do I sell a throttle for California, but then Nevada, it's a free for all. You can do whatever you want.
Right.
The consumer themselves, if they want to go fast, they'll buy a throttle in Nevada. Say I live in Nevada, I have a friend in Nevada, or I don't know where, or Texas or wherever. And so it makes it really difficult for the manufacturers who are trying to respect the laws and give the consumers the legal products in their area and make it legit. And there's always going to be some bypass. And until we have some sort of federal legislation, it's going to be really challenging for anybody to really monitor and making sure that everybody is respecting the existing laws in the marketplace. So the laws will be cheated. I mean, it's just a reality. I don't see any easy way around it. There isn't going to be any easy way around it until we have some sort of federal legislation. That's my thoughts on that.
I appreciate that, William. And if you had a customer who came in and could you imagine yourself explaining it to them, or how, it's kind of putting you on the spot, but it would be very tricky.
Well, we have it now. So in Canada, we have legislation for all of our e-bikes that, They're either class 1 or class 2. We're not allowed having class 3 bikes in Canada. And there are class 3 bikes in Canada. They cross the border, pick them up in the US, or there's some importers that are not being checked. They bring in e-bikes, just take the black and the red wire together and bam, you've got yourself a high-speed e-bike. And there is that type of customer that does exist. They're always going to exist. But the thing is that we need to have, federal legislation that's going to control it across the whole country. And we're the same thing in Canada. We have each province talks about one idea and what we're going to do, but then another province does something different. One province is 18, the other one you could be 4 years old and drive an e-bike at 85 kilometers an hour if you wanted to. It's just this whole mix-up, and there's no consistency across the board.
Yeah. Thank you, William. Thank you so much. I see several of our panel members have their hands up, and we have some questions in chat. So it looks like we're going to have a great discussion here. Clint, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on some of the past comments. As far as standardization across the country, I sat in on People for Bikes 2024 Wins webinar yesterday and found out that Utah and Minnesota have revised their e-bike definitions and stuff, similar to what now California will be enacting. So we know of 3 states. The other thing that I believe Richard mentioned, selling these market products. So part of California Bill AB 1774 added a new subsection which kind of addresses this. It says a person, and I take it anybody, whether a manufacturer, retailer, or a private person, a person shall not sell a product, aftermarket throttle, or device, say like a dongle that you can attach to the motor, that can modify the speed capability of an electric bicycle such that it no longer meets the definition of an electric bicycle under the soon to be amended law. So that will be a crime starting in 2025. Let's be honest. It's only going to be an infraction, probably $96 at the most, but it will be an infraction crime.
Thank you, Clint. It's nice to have a law enforcement bike control instructor here. Thank you. Let's jump it over. Mike Pasquale from the Canadian Electric Bicycle Association. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Heather. I just wanted to echo what Will said. We were directly involved in those legislation changes in several provinces. We're a stakeholder at the table, and it's completely fragmented here in Canada. Each province has their own regulations. I tried explaining to the government that there's not a manufacturer that's going to develop a bike for each province. It's just not going to happen. Our market's not as large enough, so we need to all be on the same page. This way, it makes the market a lot easier and more widely accepted rather than fragmented across each province. So I just wanted to echo that. Those are some of the challenges that we're going to see from, retailers, distributors, getting their product into different states and provinces. It becomes very fragmented across the country.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah.
Heather, did you want me to respond to that one question?
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. So there's a question in the chat that came up from a retailer on Long Beach Bicycles in New York. They're a Truxas authorized dealer, and they're concerned as well. And their thoughts, asking Richard if any thoughts about making the whole line Class 2.
Well, welcome to our dealer advisory panel. You've now been installed as a dealer on our advisory panel. So I will be calling you for more feedback. But the answer is, this is exactly the question that we're going through our development right now is, are we going to take this decision of going Class 2 and only going 20 miles an hour on throttle, or going Class 3 and going 28 miles an hour? And the answer is, I don't know the answer, because we're not going to make, there are 2 very distinct groups of customers out there. And I can tell you that I don't have enough data on either way to make that decision, and why I wanted to have this conversation here to kind of get better response. Now, there are ways of working with the controllers that the minute a throttle is plugged in, it's limited to Class 2, and it won't go to Class 3. That's an option. The other issue that you have with that is that the I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But so there are ways to make, oh, is the labeling on the bike, because legally the class of the bike must be under clear coat and permanent, right? So if the bike is going to ship as a class 3, it's got to ship as a class 3. If it's going to ship as a class 2, it's got to ship as a class 2, and you can't change that decal, if that helps.
Excellent. Well, I guess we do have now a retailer on your panel. So thank you. Thank you. There we go. Thank you, Richard, for that question. A couple more hands I see up. Dawn Miller, City of New York. Dawn, nice to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see everybody. And just wanted to chime in, you know, I thought the market, like the Google search information was really telling. And it really places this industry in a pickle. Um, I think the industry has to think really hard about how much you kind of agree to an attempt to meet consumer demand for speed and power. Right now, e-bikes don't have the same unsafe reputation as like motorcycles, right? But we could get there, I think, if we keep selling it and accommodating power and speed and in an unprotected um, device, like these speeds are really fast. So so I think there's a real risk if this segment like starts to look, seem, and feel and like a motorcycle, except it has pedals. Government will step in and start regulating it more like a motorcycle. And so I think, you know, deciding not to always meet the consumer demand, would cost some sales in the short run. Perhaps for people who maybe if they only wanted an e-bike, if it was a faster e-bike rather than a more moderately paced one, it could cost some sales in the short run, but in the long run, it may be an investment in keeping this segment really distinctive so that it can have a distinctive set of regulations and sort of a distinct reputation as a safer, lower risk mode to have on your streets and to allow your mature teenager to be riding around on.
Dawn, I really appreciate that way of looking at it. We do see these fast e-bikers going down the roads, and it does give me like a moment where I'm very nervous for the future of our industry. So I appreciate that thought around it. I do think we are at a pivotal point here. Peter, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a question because I was trying to look through the language of the laws in California here. I don't see a specific ban on having a throttle on a class 3 or even a class 1 e-bike. In reading the words, those class 1 and class 3 must be pedaling to have assistance. So I always wondered, like, why do people want throttles? And in the past, I did some research on it, and some people were pointing out that they can use the throttle to regulate the amount of assist. And that can make some sense. So maybe there's an avenue there of instead of having the throttle alone driving it forward or having the torque sensor regulating the amount of assist, that the throttle can essentially adjust it, but it only functions if the rider is assisting with their pedals as well. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully, if some of you can see some language where it outright says that you can't have a throttle on a class 3, that'd be good to note. I haven't seen it yet.
And Peter, I think you bring up a really good point here, because my understanding when the bill was drafted, it was to get around this ambiguity of is a throttle allowed or not. So in some ways it hasn't taken care of that ambiguity, right? So it's a good point on your part.
Yeah, that's to Clint's point when he was talking about it, that it fell short in some areas, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we will have to look. Yeah, Clint. Yeah.
No, I was just going to mention within SB 1271, within the vehicle code section that defines an e-bike, the 3 classes, they did add a new subsection which states a class 1 or class 3 electric bicycle may have start assistance or a walk mode that propels the electric bicycle on motor power alone up to a maximum speed of 3.7 miles an hour. Funny, like on my bikes with Bosch motors, guess what? The walk assist mode is 3.7 miles an hour. Kind of funny. So, yeah, I don't know if that clarifies things or just confuses us. And if it's confusing us, how in the heck is law enforcement going to try to figure this out? Good luck.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah.
So if I could just, I think Don brought up a very, very good point. I'm not going to speak for all manufacturers, but I will tell you that I've had a number of conversations with a number of different manufacturers. And I think, at least from my perspective, is if there was absolute clarity that we don't want e-bikes to go 28 miles an hour, I'd be very happy only making my bikes go 20 miles an hour and be class one or class two. I think it's this lack of, I hate to say government regulation or government, control that forces us to make decisions that, we may or may not want to be making. But because we're dealing with a whole bunch of different players, some of different belief structures on what an e-bike is than others, it forces us to make decisions in a competitive set that we wouldn't normally want to make.
Yeah, like we almost wish it was more granular so we could just be cut and dry and not have to figure it out. John from SGS, I see your hand up. Did you want to jump in?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, I would say that the pedal assist, the 3.7 miles per hour is called out in UL 2849 for the certification of the e-bike and for the pedal assist. And it doesn't define class 1, 2, or 3. It defines the e-bike as being less than 750 watts. So then you get into these areas like if somebody mentioned that the bike should be UL certified or CE certified, and actually there is no such thing as CE certified. That's a manufacturer's declaration. It's not a third-party test or certificate, and it doesn't have any checks and balances for future products made. That's only on the current product as the manufacturer certifies it. So there's California that says, okay, your bike needs to be certified to UL 2849, or I believe they use the word certified in their wording to EN 15194. And Canada does the same thing. Where then in New York City, it's tested to UL 2849, and they even call out the battery to be certified to UL 2271, which is, in my mind, if you're going to test the bike to UL 2849, requires that the battery be certified to UL 2271. So I think New York is leading the way, and you can't go down 2849 certification without having the components of the product certified as well. And now you're going to UL 2849. And if you stick with UL 2849, you have maximum 750 watt power. They don't classify class 1, 2, or 3. And they say the pedal assist is at 3.7 miles per hour. So I'm kind of thinking that, the CPSC or something at that level needs to create some harmonization. I will say that the nice thing about UL 2849 is it's also harmonized in Canada. But Metrolinx doesn't recognize any laboratory for certification except for UL in Canada. But they accept CE mark to 15194, which again is really no testing mark at all. So it's kind of just like a hodgepodge of everything just thrown in there. And I think sticking to UL 2849 covers certain things, but it doesn't cover the speed of the bike. And I'm on running trails all the time, and I'm seeing like 45, 50 mile an hour dirt bikes, electric, going down the sidewalk of the trail because they're heading to the where the dirt trails are and stuff, and those are not allowed on there either. So there's a lot of it's all getting kind of mixed together here, and for me it's just I try to stick with what the knowns are, and I think over time it's gonna move to the 2849 and the 2271 for batteries because these issues aren't going to go away otherwise.
Thank you, John. This was a great discussion on this topic one. So thanks to Peter, we had just an outline of what that consumer research looks like, an overview of the bill. Clint gave us a walkthrough of where to find the exact information, which I thought was really helpful. And then Richard brought us back to the supply, how this impacts suppliers and retailers. And then basically this conversation just said, okay, we got to get some more harmonization happening here. So we're not going to solve it in our 20 minutes, but for me, this was a really beneficial discussion to see a lot of the different viewpoints and bring them forward. And I hope that we do continue to work on this. Thank you, everyone, for your insight, for your adds to the conversation. I thought that was great. I'm going to segue us into topic 2 to keep us on agenda. Our topic 2 is charging safety. And this is educating buyers on best practices. Such an important conversation throughout the year, but even more so maybe at the holidays where we are selling more devices that are going to homes that maybe haven't experienced e-mobility devices in the past. So the questions is, what charging best practices should retailers be sharing with buyers to ensure safe e-bike operation, including avoiding unattended charging, which we know can have dire consequences? So our first speaker, we have 3 speakers on this topic. It's such an important one, so thank you all. Ed Benjamin from the Light Electric Vehicle Association. Ed, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I hope that this screen is now showing.
Perfect.
Great. So I interpreted this question as, what do we say to our customer? The safe battery charging for an electric bicycle is a big subject. But our consumers are not likely to stay put, listen carefully, make notes, and remember it all. So we have to give them a pretty succinct message. And the succinct message is there's 2 parts to charging. One part is safety. And this perhaps is the part that is going to get everybody's attention intuitively. Fires involving e-bike batteries, especially from quality brands, are extremely rare. Unfortunately, when you say that, your customer is likely to say, okay, I don't have to worry about it. It's like charging my mobile phone, not have to worry about it. But charging and discharging are delicate moments for these large format batteries. And the second part is completely charging the battery all the way to optimized performance. One of the things that is not widely understood is that your battery is only going to perform as well as the weakest cell in the battery. And some of these batteries have got 65 cells or more in them, and a variety of life experience for the cells, the variety of capabilities as a result. So the first thing we should teach them is safety. Only use the charger that came with the bike. We've been saying this for 25 years. It's worth saying again. Only charge when someone is present. Have a smoke detector in place, and do not smoke. Do not smoke. Do not charge overnight. Again, we've been saying this for a long time. That doesn't mean the consumer has really absorbed it. So let's say it again. Charge in a place that's out of the weather, but a place where if there's any reason to be worried, there's smell, smoke, or any kind of a problem, you can quickly and safely eject that battery. By the way, you want to eject the battery and the charger, and perhaps the entire bicycle from the structure. I give an example. I charge my bikes inside a garage that has an overhead door. If one of them started to make a smell or a hissing noise, I could open the overhead door and push the bike out into the pavement, and my risk is now dramatically reduced. Put a timer on the mains current. You can buy a timer from Amazon for about $21, $22, something like that. And if you forget that you left a bike on charge or you left a battery on charge, the timer will go ahead and cut the current to the charger. This is an enormous step in the right direction. It's cheap, it's easy. And the charging time that you want to use is usually 4 hours. A lot of people figure if 4 hours is good, then 12 hours is better. No. Read your owner's manual. Make sure you know what is recommended for your bike. Now, you should also coach your family, your neighbors. If you're living in a multi-unit building and you're going to be charging it indoors, or if you are in a strip center and you're going to be charging your customers' bikes indoors, talk to the neighbors. Make sure they understand that if you start screaming, get out, evacuate, that it's a serious issue. Now, that's frightening for a consumer. We are not normally told that using this product may require you to evacuate your home. I don't know what the gentle words are, but what I tell the consumers I come in contact and what I tell my employees is if we get smoke and flame, we need everybody out of the building, and we need them out of the building right now. And they usually don't take me very seriously, so maybe I'm not saying it loud enough. Optimizing charging. Read your owner's manual, do what it says. Very simple. Most battery makers will plan for a 0.25C charge cycle, which is 4 hours. Check that your charger has power and it is working. It's always frustrating to leave your bike on charge and have it not charge. Be aware that your charger may get hot. So you want to make sure that whatever surface your charger is on is also something that can tolerate heat. Now, one thing that I didn't put on this list that I want to bring up is go over the stuff with your customer, and then get them to sign a delivery checklist that says that they've been advised of only using the charger that came with your bike, only charging when someone is present, being aware of how you're going to get the bike or the battery out of the house if there's any kind of an issue, and being aware that if there is any kind of an issue, you need to get the people out. One of the ways to get that point across, I suspect everybody here has seen what happens when an e-bike battery lights off. It is catastrophic. We don't want to frighten our consumer into backing away from the sale, but we certainly do want our staff to understand that this is catastrophic. Talk to every customer about it. That's all I've got on that subject.
Excellent. That was a really nice presentation of exactly what a retailer should be telling a consumer. I really appreciate that added stress factor there of reviewing and having a customer sign or acknowledge that they got this information. We want to keep as many people as safe as possible. Thank you so much. We do have another speaker on this topic, Mark Bullish, the Rechargeable Battery Association. Mark, thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome. Let me get my sharing up here. That's showing up all right?
I think so. Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. As mentioned, I am Mark Bullish with PRBA, the Rechargeable Battery Association. My contact information is listed here in case you have follow-up questions that you think of at some point. Very briefly, PRBA, our members are every stakeholder in the battery business, basically. And we represent all the way, we represent companies that get involved with mining of the materials, through the production of the batteries, through the use, transportation, sale of the batteries, all the way through end of life. So at any stage of the life, the life of that battery or even the materials before and after, we're involved in all of those different areas. So we have many different members that are involved in the work that we do. We also get very involved in international transportation forums, particularly on all battery types, but it's really focused now more so on the lithium-ion and to some extent the sodium-ion type batteries of all shapes and sizes, everything dealing with the tiniest little batteries that go into watches and wearable devices, all the way up through grid storage size batteries. So we represent all the different forums. We do get involved in regulatory, legislative, and policy issues at the state, local, and even international levels. And obviously safety issues are part of that as well. So I know we only have about 5 minutes per presentation, so some of this will be a little bit redundant. You may have heard this in Ed's presentation, but I think, what he said at one point there was very pertinent, and that is, we would rather you hear this multiple times than not at all. It is extremely important. So what I'm going to do is I'll cover some of the reality here, and then I'll briefly talk about, the use, the charging, and the storage of the batteries and the devices, and how you can maximize efficiency and safety. So the reality that we see today is there obviously are increasing sales of these devices that are out there, all the different e-mobility devices. But unfortunately, we're continuing to see incidents with these devices. And part of the reason around that has to do with charging and some other items that I'll mention in this presentation. The reality too is, I know, and I'll say it, I know Ed said it, and I'm sure others have said it and will say it, and that is unattended charging. We do recognize that as a challenge. We don't, certainly while it would be ideal if you could sit there and watch the battery charge for 4, 6, 8 hours, that is not real life. So we do have some ideas in here on how you can maximize the safety during charging. The other reality here to think of is when you think of the batteries that we've been using for a number of years, I mean, things that power our smartwatches and cell phones and items like that, it's the same chemistry and technology, generally speaking, but they do so much more now and they're in such a larger format. So the example I give here is, yeah, you think of the energy that your iPhone or your watch uses. I mean, it's not insignificant, but it is orders of magnitude less than something that can move an average sized adult anywhere from 25 to 100 miles or more on a single charge. So think about that just for a second. If you put me on a scooter with a little bit of legs and you had to push me up and down hills for somewhere between 25 and 100 miles, that would take a lot of energy out of you. So think about that battery. That battery is capable of doing that on a single charge. So it's a lot of energy in there, and that's why these devices have to be respected because they do contain quite a bit of energy. But the other reality too is we all lead our lives and our lives are busy. So any messaging that we do has to be to the point. It has to be simple. So there's certainly we have our work cut out for us in that aspect, but that's one thing to definitely keep in mind. It can't be too much. So the first category is the use, and I'll even say pre-use here. First and foremost, when you're purchasing an e-bike, a scooter, whatever it may be, purchase it from a reputable source. Your reputable retailers, your reputable bike shops, places like that, they follow not only the rules and regulations, but what's going on in that industry, and they know what's going on. They are knowledgeable about what to look for, how to treat your e-bike or your e-mobility device and everything like that. They are a great source of information, not only for just the use of it, but the safety aspect of it as well. Certainly, routinely check for damage to the battery compartment or the batteries. If you see something that's out of the ordinary, and I have an example here like heat distortion, certainly not all the time, but there are times when a battery can give you a little bit of an early warning sign that something's going to happen. These battery compartments are not designed so that they show damage. Well, they're not designed to be damaged. So if you do see something like heat distortion, paint peeling off, something that looks out of the ordinary, that is a sign that you should be thinking about this and take it to your dealer. The do nots on here, under any circumstances, open the battery compartment or the battery. As I mentioned, these batteries contain a lot of energy, and if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not an authorized dealer, you can get yourself into trouble very quickly. Also, do not attempt to repair any part of the bike that's associated with the battery directly. That's just like opening the battery compartment in a lot of ways. There's the potential for short circuit or a number of other items that could happen, which can lead to an incident with the battery. And finally, when in doubt, take it to a reputable dealer. As I mentioned, they are a great source of information. They know what to do, what not to do. So when in doubt, take your device to a reputable dealer. On charging, you've heard this already, but I'm going to say it again. Only use the charger supplied by the manufacturer. While the safety at the individual battery or battery pack is certainly something that is designed into the battery pack, when you think of these devices, these e-mobility devices, your reputable manufacturers look at this as a system. So the charger is part of that system, just like the batteries are part of the system, just like the bike or other e-mobility device is part of that system. So that charger is designed specifically to maximize or to maximize safety or prevent an issue altogether. Being present during charging, I did mention that. Obviously, we recognize that you can't sit there and watch your device charge. But simple things like don't charge it overnight when you're sleeping, don't leave it unattended in your garage. If it's somewhere around where you are available or you can hear something that may be able to happen, that's one of the key components to making sure that you can get out if you need to or do something that you may need to do. And then lastly here, do not leave the e-mobility device plugged in after charging. So when that device is done charging, don't leave it to sit there just to cook and charge more and more. While most, if not all of those e-mobility devices are designed so that that won't overcharge the battery, we say here, don't do it anyway, just to be on the side of caution. And then finally on storage, certainly do not store your device in the elements. Store it in a garage, store it in a dry location where it's not going to see rain or snow or other elements. Store it in a cool location. That doesn't mean you need to put it in a refrigerator or something. It means basically if you keep your device in something that you can stand to be in, anywhere from just above freezing to hot but not too hot, that's what we're saying. Dry and cool or relatively cool. Keep it in those types of locations. Also, as possible, keep it in a well-ventilated location because ventilation will help circulate the air, keep the area cooler and more temperate. And then finally, another one that's key here is keep the device away from heat sources. So, for example, don't store it in the sun. If the sun is beating in, think about if you are standing on a hot day in the sun, it's warm. And well, if that bike is sitting there in that battery compartment, more importantly, is being cooked by the sun, that could potentially lead to an incident. Don't store it next to something like a hot water heater or a furnace where that can heat up the batteries and the device itself too. So those are just some key items, for a pre-use charging and storage. And with that, I will pass on to the next presenter or back to Heather.
Excellent. Mark, thank you. I appreciate how our presenters are just continuing to kind of build on each other. And Mark gave us the messaging for consumers around storage. So there is lots here. Clint, I saw your question come in. We'll have our additional speaker and then we'll do open forum and address your question. So our final speaker is Luke Elrath, bicycle and bicycling technical consultant for AFI Forensic. Luke.
Thank you very much, Heather. And by way of introduction, I came from the bicycle industry. I was a product manager, first at Advanced Sports and then at Trek. I have an electrical engineering degree, and while I designed regular bicycles in both of those roles, I also was involved in electric bike development and manufacture. And part of my role as a product manager at Trek was also dealer interactions. I met with our authorized dealers. We talked about training, about policies, and offered them both evaluation and insight into the dealer-customer relations as it relates to safety. So I take all of that experience in what I do now, which is oftentimes when something happens and a civil litigation is created, one party sues another for something that went wrong. And in a scenario like this, somebody gets an e-bike from a bike shop. Something happens that causes an injury or property damage with that product. And oftentimes what happens is the purchaser will file a lawsuit against the bike shop to say, I didn't know that these things were hazards. I wasn't aware that this was a concern, and how would I have known to do or avoid doing something without that information? I carry out investigations. These are often with the documents that are provided at the time of sale and the sworn testimony of the parties involved through depositions. And I use all that information and my experience, education, and training to inform an analysis. Who did what wrong to cause the thing that is at the heart of this litigation? And the two concepts that come up all the time in my investigation and my eventual testimony, if it comes to it, is the concepts of standard of care and duty to warn. So standard of care in the legal industry is basically defined as what would a reasonable entity do in this scenario. So what we're talking about here is bike shops. What would a reasonable bike shop concerned for their own safety and the safety of their customers do in this scenario? Meaning, I'm selling an e-bike to a customer. Well, the first thing in the standard of care is to realize that the bike shop is the expert. You're the one who is got the most information about how to use this thing safely. And so you have a standard as a bike shop to, at the time of sale to a customer, tell them this bike is different than things that you might have had before. It's on the dealer to ask questions to allow them to understand what information needs to be imparted to the customer so that they can use it safely. So, have you ever owned an electric bike before? Have you ever ridden one before? Is this your first time with a bike like this? Do you know anything about the charging of larger electric devices? Those things inform what a reasonable dealer would tell a customer at the time of sale. But there are some minimums, and I think the other two presenters here, I think, hit the biggest three that I would talk about. Number one, don't charge unattended. Absolutely critical. Number two, the integrity of the electrical components of the bicycle. If you see any damage or swelling or distortion of batteries and any of the components associated with batteries, that is a customer's key to understand there's an issue. I shouldn't do anything about it. I should come back to the retailer. And the third one is one that every bike shop should be telling every customer, e-bike or not. And in my experience, it doesn't happen quite a bit, which is you need to read the owner's manual for this device. And one of the previous presenters talked about a document at the time of purchase of an e-bike where the customer has to sign off on a certain amount of checklists. I have been shown the operation of this e-bike. I have been given sufficient warnings about the things that are necessary to use it safely. I have been given the owner's manual and told that there are critical safety factors in there that I need to read about before using this e-bike. And since we're talking about what I would call specialty retailers selling e-bikes here, I'm going to leave out the part that has direct-to-consumer e-bikes that have owner's manuals that are woefully inadequate in giving proper warnings. What I'm making an assumption here is that the dealers that are on this call are selling bikes and e-bikes that come with an owner's manual that meets the federal requirements for what information should be in them. So if you're telling your customer those three things at the time of sale, you can't charge this thing unattended. There's a danger to that. There's a danger to damage to the components. And there's a lot of safety information in the owner's manual that is critical to be understood before you use the product. I think what you're doing, at least in my realm, is eliminating some of the liability that you have as selling a product that is potentially hazardous. So these are the things informed by my working in cases in which bike shop owners or managers testified that, oh, we don't want to burden the customer with information. We don't want to talk down to them. And if they have questions, we tell them we're there to answer them. In my opinion, that doesn't meet the standard of care. It is critical for the seller of an e-bike to impart some minimum amount of information at the time of sale. And I think the things that the other presenters mentioned are the real critical ones. And I'm just here to say that you can potentially face some legal liabilities if you don't take that minimum of asking questions and imparting the information at the time of sale, that one and only time that you may have to be in front of the customer to really emphasize what is important. I think that that's pretty much what I had. And in this forum, I'm certainly interested in those people with shops and retailers who have sales experience to chime in with other important instructions or warnings, or any resistance they get from customers about that conversation at the time of sale.
Yeah, Luke, that was really informative, and it is, we need to be diligent about having this conversation with every customer that comes in. We have had reports this past month, I believe, of two retailers who had incidents at their shop. So this is happening, and we do need to be diligent to warn our customers. Before Dawn had to leave the panel. Before she left, she did say in chat here that the FDNY, their data is now showing that just as many fires are started by batteries that were not charging as were batteries that are charging. So this is very surprising. So they're looking at additional safe storage options. And then a question came in, do we look at things like racks and sleeves and cell block as an alternative? I mean, this is like next step. So there's that question for the panel members. And then there's also just, do we have any pushback when we're talking to consumers about this, these safety protocols? Just open it up for like 5 minutes of discussion. Anyone want to jump in on that, panel members?
Yeah, I can. This is Mark. I can certainly start. I mean, I would love to see that information that about from FDNY. Certainly, as a battery is being stored, if it is damaged, it can induce some type of incident as well. If it's crushed or dented or whatever else. I mean, that can be a problem. Over discharge also potentially can be an issue, although it tends to be less of an issue because at that point the battery has so much less power in it, but it certainly can be. So I'd be very curious to see that, just if there's any information we can glean from that to understand. But certainly, I mean, as I mentioned in my presentation, respect for the battery is for any part of the life of that battery. Just respect about the amount of energy that's in there, and so don't damage it.
Yeah, Mark, I can connect you to Dawn too, if you don't have her contact. We'll make sure you get that.
Okay.
Anyone else want to jump in here? Michael.
I'd like to say, Luke, that was very informative what you talked about, the dealers educating the consumer. I think that's extremely important in our industry. And that's one of the bonuses that a consumer gets when they go to a dealer, is that expertise and that information. Maybe not enough dealers are providing that, but I do agree with that there should be something in place to have consumers sign off that they were educated on the batteries and the safety aspect. One other thing about what Dawn said about batteries are having incidents just sitting around. In the northern climates here where I am and northern US, if you're going to store your batteries, generally you don't want to store a full battery. You want to keep the charge low between 30 and 50%. It'll be in your manual, but that reduces the likelihood of having a fully stored battery, kind of like a full gas can in your garage. It's going to store a lot more energy, right? So you want to keep your batteries at a lower charge during storage.
Excellent, thank you. We'll take a couple more comments here. William.
Yeah, actually, two comments for speakers. So Luke, number one, great presentation. As a retailer of electric bicycles, I would really appreciate some input from you on if we're doing things are right. I mean, we do a walkthrough with all the customers who do purchase bikes for us. All the staff do that. We give them a walkthrough of the manuals. We also provide, one of our suppliers and key suppliers provides an excellent manual on how to maintain batteries. So exactly some of the topics that we covered today are covered in that manual. So we hand that over to every single customer. And one of the things we're looking at is to also apply a QR code to our charger boxes. That will also be a link where a customer can scan and go to a website, our website, showing proper charging habits and what you should and shouldn't do. So very similar to the topics that were covered, the best practices, and to apply that as well. Sign-off sheets we don't do. It's at the same token, it's a balance between giving a customer a great experience, and then on the flip side is scaring the living heck out of them, saying, what did I just do? And I bought an electric bicycle and I shouldn't be touching this. I should be going back to traditional. So it's a balance in the marketplace. Do you find that what we're using now, so the QR code that we're looking at implementing, supplying with a manual, a very basic clean guide specifically targeting maintaining your lithium battery and how to charge it properly, and giving the walkthrough is enough based on your investigations? Would that suffice based on your opinion?
Unfortunately, the answer that I most frequently give in testimony is it depends. And that applies to your question as well. It certainly depends on the content of what you are actually putting into that manual. But what I will say is that I've been in many cases in which a bicycle or an e-bike retailer is sued because of a claim that something that they did failed to meet the standard of care. And the shops that are the most successful in those type of litigations are the ones with the most documentation. Documentation in what? Like I just said, we got a checklist. There's a case that I'm in right now. It's a chain of retailers in the Midwest, and their document, when they sell a bike, says specifically, I've been warned about the inherent dangers of cycling. And one way to reduce those is to read everything in the owner's manual according to warnings and cautions. Another one is that I have been given the owner's manual. It's a critical thing that often just simply gets left off. I'm shocked at how many bike shops will admit that sometimes we give it, sometimes we don't. But another thing is to document all the training that you as a retailer or your employees have gone through to understand how to do this safely. One of them is you could simply have a list of all of these panels that you've attended. Look, I'm interested in safety for e-bike sales, and by doing that quarterly, I sit in and listen to best practices on something like this type of forum. But also there's the Light Electric Vehicle Association has a course on e-bike safety. I've been to, I think, that one, which was held at the Barnett's Bicycle Institute when that was around. I've been to safety seminars at some of the bike industry events, like formerly Interbike, and some of the other ones used to have seminars on safe e-bike sales, storage, service, charging. And if you've got a piece of paper that says, I, as a retailer or a bike shop employee, attended these things to help me understand what's necessary to be safe. If, in fact, unfortunately, you get into a litigation situation, that's all you do. You say, look, we know what we're doing. We had principles, procedures, and policies that we held to. We know that we did because they're in writing, and here is the proof of it. So documentation for me is the biggest critical thing. And obviously, training is part of that. But to be able to show that we thought about safety before something went wrong, we took proactive steps to understand all the best practices to mitigate that potential hazard. And here's the records of it. You're in a strong position.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Lou. We'll take one more comment here and then we're going to move on to our next topic. John from SGS, I see your hand up.
Hi. Yeah, I was actually looking at all the points here made are very correct. And, with using a charger that is not approved by the manufacturer is a big situation. And I was thinking about Don's comment about some fires being caused not even during the charging stage. And then I would also reflect back on the standard. And usually certification standards have all the important marking and labels that are required to be put on a product. And you believe it or not, in UL 2849, it doesn't say one of the markings is to don't charge unintended. I don't know, but it does say in there that you should charge under certain ambient temperatures and that you should use the bike under certain ambient temperatures. So some of the fires caused by the batteries not even being charged could be due to their storage temperatures. When you certify the battery, just to give everybody a little bit more sign of comfort, batteries have battery management systems in them. And, while somebody said this technology's been around for years and years and years, lithium batteries, like in our laptops, our cameras and stuff like that. In this case, there's so many more of them, right? More batteries. And somebody mentioned 100% accurate that battery pack is only as good as the weakest battery in it. And then what the battery management system does is it checks temperature and voltage and the health of each battery as it's charging, which is another reason why you want to use the manufacturer's approved charger. But actually, unattended charging is an issue I don't know how we would ever get around because these bikes sit in your garage, and unless you camp out in your garage, I don't know how you're going to charge it any other way. And it was interesting that it's not even do not charge unattended is not a statement in the standard. It's kind of interesting, that fact, but I think it has to do with the battery management systems, and that's a big part of it. So I just wanted to add that.
Excellent. And Michael Baker from ACT Labs, appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I just wanted to add really fast. Thanks for squeezing me in there. Back in July, New York passed that new series of e-bike laws as well in New York State, and they now mandate that there's a red tag on all chargers that say unplug when not in use. So to the points about, doing your research and following up on these legislations, I think that's important because this applies not only to retailers, but manufacturers. I can post the link to that, but they're doing their best to try to address this as well, but it falls under that duty to warn issue that Luke talked a lot about. So I think that's important.
Michael, that would be wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing for the industry. A lot of thoughts here, a lot of great information, very valuable information, and always good to hear again. It just makes me think that every retailer listening should have a process in place. And if you need help defining what that process is, reach out to the NBDA and we can make sure we connect you with the right person. We also do have a free PDF for our members that you can download that was prepared by Human Powered Solutions team that you can provide to customers at the time of purchase that goes over these protocols as well. So really appreciate this conversation. We're going to go into topic 3. And I feel like, Luke, I'm just going to bring you right on. The conversation is e-bike wear and tear. And again, here we're talking about the retailer's role in the maintenance education. So when we're talking to consumers, how can we emphasize the importance of regular inspections for wear items, think your brake pads, on e-bikes to ensure safety and longevity? The very important conversation. We have one speaker on this. So Luke, would you like to walk us through this one as well?
Certainly. Thank you, Heather. So this will be largely a continuation of the topics that I've been talking about already, but I will address right up front that I understand that retailers will have a little bit of resistance to what we've already talked about. If I give them all these warnings, customers are going to say, wait a minute, is this more hazardous than I'm willing to take on? And I'm changing my mind about being so excited about buying an e-bike. I don't know that there's any answer from my realm about that. I've seen that sort of testimony from bike shops who are being sued by customers who they were sold a bike that was inappropriate with zero discussion. And through the course of litigation, essentially it came out that the bike shop did nothing, assumed no responsibility for the use of the product, and they bear a financial negative outcome of it at the end of a court case. So I understand the concerns about overloading the customers or customers resistant to a long conversation at the time of sale. I'm just saying that in my experience, these are the things that can insulate you from some of that liability if something does go wrong. So in the case of discussing wear items, the first thing I would do is ask the customer if they understood what wear items are. And I love owner's manuals in the bike industry. It's part of my job. I read them, hundreds of them. And the Ritchie owner's manual has a section in their manual that starts with a bold header that says, nothing lasts forever. And it goes on to have a great couple of paragraphs that simply say, you can't expect everything on your bike to last forever. It's a collection of a bunch of different parts of different materials and different constructions. And based on your use and the environment and a bunch of other factors that we can't quantify in this manual, things are going to wear out at different speeds and different rates. And that means that everything on your bike or your e-bike, eventually, if we take this hypothetical to the end, will need to be inspected, serviced, repaired, replaced, whatever. And so with that understanding, I would give the customers a quick description of what's a wear item. Things that wear down and need to be replaced with the use of the product. Tires, chains, brake pads, control cables. In the case of an e-bike, eventually your battery is going to need to be replaced. And when you start to tell people this, yes, you get resistance. You get people who don't believe that, or you're trying to sell them things spuriously. But for sure, the expectation that there are parts on your bike that are necessary for the safe operation of the e-bike. They wear out during the use and they'll need to be replaced eventually. Brings up the next obvious topic, which is inspection. How do you or someone who's trained periodically evaluate the condition of all these wear items on your e-bike and make a determination as to when it's time to change them? And I think the easiest way to have that conversation is to simply say, this is just physics. All other things being equal, if it's the same brakes or the same tires or the same chain, an e-bike is heavier and is able to achieve higher speeds than an equivalent regular old bicycle. All other factors controlled, that means that you're going to go through all of these parts quicker just because there's more forces involved. It's a heavier bike and it goes faster, usually. And what that means is that where a good rule of thumb is bike shops will tell a customer of any bike, you should bring it in every year to get inspected and tuned up. When you're selling an e-bike, I would say that that is the absolute bare minimum to recommend to a customer. And if they use it a lot, which many people find that they do because it frees them up from the concerns of being tired or climbing hills or whatever else, the more you use it, the more you're going to have to either inspect it yourself or bring it to a trained mechanic to understand that all the components are still safe for use and have sufficient life. And those are the sort of things that you can simply impart to a customer by saying, you need to bring this in every year and more if you ride more. They might have a customer might have a preconceived notion of the required frequency of inspection and maintenance. This is the opportunity for you to say e-bikes are a little bit different, and like we said, all things being equal, you're going to have this looked at more frequently. You're going to have to replace brake pads more frequently. All these other things in the conversation. The retailer is responsible to set the expectation. And that might just simply be read your owner's manual. The good owner's manuals that I've seen that come with e-bikes and regular bicycles have a passage in there that says, this needs to be inspected and maintained by somebody who knows what they're doing on some periodic basis. I've never seen an owner's manual that will put a timeline on that. What they say is that that period is affected by things like use and severity and conditions and rider weight and weight of payloads and a bunch of other things. But I think that most manuals make it clear that this thing isn't just going to get sold to a customer and last forever and never malfunction or wear down. So you're setting that expectation of number one, read your owner's manual, because you're going to get reiterations in writing of the things that we're telling you in person. But also, I think most owners' manuals are pretty clear that some sort of inspection and ongoing maintenance will be required to maintain the safe operating quality of your e-bike. Again, I said it in the previous topic and in this one, absolutely critical. The bare minimum is for, at the time of the sale of an e-bike, to say, here's an owner's manual. It's critical that you read it. There's important stuff in there that we cannot say at you at the time of sale. You're not going to retain it all, but there are nuances in this owner's manual that are critical for you to understand. They are probably different than your experience with regular bicycles in the past, so take the time to look at it. And I will say here in closing is that I've been involved in cases in which a dealer agreement with the brand of bike or e-bike that they're selling explicitly says that the dealer is agreeing to impart all warnings and cautions to the purchaser at the time of sale. And that is a covenant that they have agreed to with the manufacturers of the e-bikes that they're selling. So I have been in cases in which that was a major part of the decision, is that, look, you're the dealer. You signed this agreement that said at the time of sale, I will give all the applicable warnings to the customer about the use of this product. And I've had retailers say, we didn't tell them anything, and admit to that, even in contravention of the thing that they agreed to in the dealer agreement. So all these things are critical, but it is, again, an opportunity to have an informed conversation with the customer based on some information that you gather from them. What's your experience? What's your expectations? And here's the realities. And so at the risk of being repetitive, I think that's kind of the topics and the content that I wanted to stress.
Yeah, I thank you again, Luke. You're so informative, and the great detail is really appreciated. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for retailers to stand up and provide this education. It's also an opportunity to get your customers back into your store. I know some retailers like the New Wheel in California, who actually has created their own supplemental manual, which is just a folder that they provide to the customer that outlines a maintenance schedule with a little box that they can check off as the customer comes in. So it kind of sets that precedent of what's expected with your e-bike. And I think that's a really great way to keep the customer informed, keep those bikes safe, and keep them coming back to you for those services. Unfortunately, we're out of time to open this up for more conversation, but Luke, I think your summary was spot on, and I think we all did learn a lot. Today's conversations have been great. The three topics are very timely and very pointed. I'm going to turn it over to Jay to give a summary, and then we'll go to adjourn. Jay?
Thank you, Heather. I agree. This was a very good discussion all the way through today. I think we learned a lot, and I think we were able also to have a very good interchange of ideas, and particularly being able to get our information discussed. Specifically from the standpoint of what I feel my takeaways here are, is the combination of what Peter did and also Clint relative to the what are the regulations in California, I think was extremely informative. I would encourage all of the people to listen to this, and then additionally the NBDA membership, both the manufacturing, supply, and dealer side of this, to follow up on Clint's suggestions as to how you can learn more about the California regulations and laws. Hopefully we can find the same information for the state of New York, which has moved in this direction, and any other states that we found are moving also to implement legislation and regulation. The one thing that wasn't discussed that I think we can bring up relative to this is this whole discussion is lending itself to what we found with the original federal regulation when it was promulgated back in the late 70s, early 80s, and that's federal preemption. We heard several times from both Canada and the United States, we need a federal law. It's being worked on. There is work in CPSC right now moving in the direction of that update, adding e-bikes, adding lithium-ion batteries, but we also need to look at the issues of federal preemption and the preemption of the federal laws and regulations over the states. Because quite frankly, the industry's faced this issue of we can't meet multiple state requirements before. You can't, and you're going to have to deal with it by coming up with a unified preemptive federal regulation. I think the industry should give its weight and some of its advice in that direction, by the way. The next topic, I think, was also particularly important to us as an industry, and that's learning more about the overall issues that we face in maintaining lithium-ion battery systems. And I will echo what Dawn has said. HBS has also seen the fact that in New York City in particular, there are more and more instances of thermal runaway incidents that are not related to charging. Some of this, by the way, goes to battery quality, lithium-ion battery quality, from the problems of the epicenter being New York, receiving more and more of the substandard batteries. But that's a separate question with a separate issue. Was not discussed here, but I do think the whole point of we've got to be very, very mindful of maintaining batteries, of getting information across to consumers, continually repeating, as Ed said, and several other presenters did. You say it once, don't expect the consumer to remember it. Make sure you keep repeating this. Put posters in the store. Do what you can to get it to emphasize all the positives in the duty to warn that Luke has talked about. And finally, and lastly, the piece that Luke brought up, the owner's manual, the importance of the checklists, the examples that Heather gave. What I got from that is I think that retailers need to look at the most positive way they can create a checklist and a paper audit and a trail, then keep that on record in some way, shape, or form. Heather, I think it also goes to the issue of perhaps the NBDA and CABDA should be thinking about certificates of completion for the various workshops that dealers will be attending, where they will be able to put in their files the fact that they and their employees have had a level of education and knowledge created by the National Bicycle Dealers Association or the Chicago Area Bicycle Dealers Association, so that they'll have the paper audit that Luke is talking about, or the paper trail, and the trail audit in file, that God forbid there's a litigation and they get sued, but still they could produce this. And read your authorized dealer agreements, folks, and make sure that if that clause is there that Luke talked about, you've got that audit trail that you could back it up in case you get that lawsuit. So that's my summary at this point, Heather. Excellent session. I enjoyed it greatly. Thank you.
Jay, thank you. Panel members, attendees, thank you today. It's all of us coming together that makes this discussion what it is, such high quality. I appreciate you all. Our next event, the panel will meet on Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. Thank you once again to everyone. We appreciate your time today and look forward to continuing to work in partnership. Thank you all.